Honestly, the thing that I miss most about The Shining is that that guy isn't getting any work done, and he has such a great opportunity. So okay. Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our retrospective focused on movies based on Stephen King's Carrie. This week we discuss the 2002 TV film Carrie, starring indie darling Angela Bettis. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's film, or indeed any movie based on Carrie, because we're going to talk about all of them. That's the point of this retrospective. We're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo from Fievel and Friends, Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy, slow style.
Howdy. And I know that I sound like I have a cold, and I apologize. I'm just going to apologize in advance for that I sound like Rudolph the
Half
Red-Nosed
the
Reindeer.
United
I don't.
States has a cold. You're fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Great.
I just fit right in. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Because it's a Carrie is a 2002 American horror television film based on the novel Carrie by Stephen King. It is the second adaptation of the novel and a remake of the 1976 version. The film was written by Brian Fuller and directed by David Carson, and it stars Angela Bettis, who Tony and I saw in the movie May. In the story, Carrie White, a shy girl who is harassed by her schoolmates, disappears, and a series of flashbacks reveals what has happened to her. So
Well, let me
let's
stop you
get
there, Jason. Let me stop you there
Yeah.
and say that it actually didn't come out before Carrie. They filmed it before Carrie, but it came out after. So a lot of people thought that she was cast in May because of what she did in Carrie, but it was actually the other way around, that they had seen what she did in May,
Yeah.
like the producers, and then they cast her in Carrie, but it came out after Carrie did.
It came out after Carrie?
Yeah.
I'm shocked by that. I totally believe you, but I'm pretty certain that I saw May before I saw this movie.
No. It's possible because we had seen it. I think we saw in advance.
Yeah, we saw it at
Button-A-Mathon.
Advance at Button-A-Mathon, yes.
And so it's possible. Also, a lot of people saw, like, they were coming out around the same time. So depending on when you saw it, you could have seen one before the other, like what you're talking about. But yeah, there was that is strange because I remember being kind of confused. Or then when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, well, I mean, she's perfect to play Carrie. Look at her performance in May. That makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
But that could have happened in that timeline for sure.
So okay, but this is the 2002 remake of Carrie. So Tony, opening thoughts. Carrie 2002.
I had seen this a while back, but I can't remember when. And I'm pretty sure I watched it almost back to back, like over the course of like 2 days with the newer remake. And I remember not liking this one that much. And then I watched it this time and perhaps liked it a little better. I'm still puzzled by some of the choices, and it's not great. But it was better than I remembered. Overall, like for a TV adaptation, not too bad. Although it is funny since it's Brian Fuller and seeing Hannibal. Like Hannibal, I was surprised that was on network TV. I'm still surprised it's on network TV.
Yeah.
And the parts that they play vary. I guess what 15 years, 16 years will do. It's barely. I mean, it's TV 14. It doesn't do a lot of horror movie, like there's not much gore,
No.
Even the blood is not even as bloody as the original Carrie movie. And I don't know, it's very strangely chased in a lot of ways that I have forgotten about. And it's okay. I didn't hate it like I thought I was going to, but it's not something I'll be picking up over and over again. I'm pretty sure.
Very good. Okay, Julia, I don't know if you were aware of this remake, and what Tony says is that the thing is, it's a TV version, so it's way too chaste. What are your thoughts on the 2002
Also,
Carrie?
no, way too. It just was more than I remember.
It's notably okay. Fair enough. Okay, that it's noticeably chaste in that way,
Yeah,
or
sure.
it's noticeably like it's tamed, compared.
Well,
to
yeah,
how it
I
could
mean,
be.
I would agree that there are certain things, for example, it's definitely more risque and a little more gory than I would expect most TV things to be. I agree with that as well. But certainly you can tell that some stuff has been eliminated. For example, in the there's the girls' locker room, but there's no real nudity. Although it is pretty sexy. I mean, like when she's taking her shower, she's all like sexy. I was telling Jason, I'm like, yeah, women don't do that when they take the showers. It's not like, oh,
In the
I'm
gym
in that
class,
Skinemax movie.
in the
I'm in a
grody gym
Skinemax
class,
movie
that's
for a
not.
second.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Anyway, and then, but even I, who don't like gore and violence in movies, was disappointed at the fact that nobody gets like beheaded or like
Yeah.
with flying, like when the whatever that was that comes crashing down onto the one girl. I was like, oh, that would have been a perfect opportunity to like behead or bisect her or something. So it's not that I
Absolutely.
necessarily want to see those scenes. It's just I'm so used to seeing them that I did notice their absence in this case. But no, there's plenty of gore in this film as well. But I think that's the only way that I could really identify that it was a television movie. I didn't actually feel like it felt particularly made for TV-esque.
That's interesting.
It's
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was brilliant. I'm not saying it was a brilliant film. It just didn't scream made for TV to me. I think she's a really interesting actress. I liked her a lot with her the kind of the trances that she would go into and just like the stiff arms and all. I thought she did a great job of just really seeming nuts, super nuts. And it was, there was some interesting character work, and the relationship with the mom was definitely complicated. So there was a lot I liked about it. Yeah, I think it stood up to. I definitely don't feel like it was. I don't know if it was as good as the other one, certainly, but I didn't feel like it was just way worse than the other one than the original. So, yeah, I'm not gonna go so far as to say I really enjoyed it because I don't like the Carrie story. There's a lot I don't like about it.
So, Drew, would you agree that does this? Could you tell? If I just tuned into this, would you go, "Oh, well, this is a TV movie"? Is that where your brain would go?
Yeah. So I didn't actually know that this movie existed until relatively recently, and I mean maybe it's because I just was never that into the original Carrie movie, as I said on our podcast about the original film, and then last week. Once I learned about this movie and I learned who some of the people involved with it was, I was kind of excited to watch it. But I was very disappointed when I actually watched it. I think this is Brian Fuller is a very talented guy, and there's some stuff in the screenplay that I think is cool, and kudos for him to actually like kind of try to show Carrie's rampage that they have in the book in this film, but I thought this was a group of I had a good cast and a good screenwriter, and I think this is a very shoddy, slow, terribly paced, overlong, dull in a lot of places. I found myself fought off, nodding off plenty of times, and the ending that they tacked on, because I guess I read later that they were thinking about doing a Carrie TV show. The ending with ridiculous jump scares, with like two of the worst jump scares I think I've seen in a contemporary. Yeah, I thought this movie looked like the worst crime though, because there's some good performances in it, but the worst crime of this movie is it doesn't just look like a TV movie, it looks like a cheap TV movie. Like there are episodes of Buffy from around this same time period that still look better than this. Like this is terrible looking. Like I just I really did not like this movie. It didn't even have like Carrie 2, as much as I razzed on it, had like a certain kitsch factor to it that made it entertaining. This didn't even have that kind of charm it had going for it. So I don't know. I really didn't like this one.
Yeah, my thing is the scope. It bugs me, and we talked about this before. Your budget. There was a movie, a horror movie created not a few years ago, where the guy's on the plane, he's going to film it, and they tell him he had like half the budget or a quarter of the budget. But this probably isn't that. Like, you kind of know. So if you know you don't have the budget to do good CG in an era there's not good CG, like, I just wish they had cut the rampage in a way that didn't involve everything looking really shoddy.
Yeah.
Considering that there's other things done for a lot less budget in a different era where the practical effects actually look decent. That still just bugs me. I don't know. And also it's cut. Like, you can see the commercial cuts in it.
Yes.
It does take you out when you see stuff like that, because it was long, so I'm guessing it was like a 2-night thing.
And that is a sin of Stephen King television all the time. I find this sort of wonderfully reliable, and you're right that it doesn't actually make it more fun. Is that Stephen King adaptations on TV always run way long? This is at 2 hours 12 minutes. This thing is longer than the Brian De Palma movie, and not least of which because, first of all, it means you have to write all of those scenes to comport with people's expectations for how we're going to lead into commercials. There's even a point, Tony, this is what I was going to point out, where they back up because they're like, we don't want you to have missed something, so they actually back up a few seconds just to restart the conversation after the commercial that is not there. Truly crazy. And then you think, to release this on VOD, don't you have like $300 to pay some associate producer to go in and just snip some of this stuff, like to just cut these fades? Or is it just not even worth doing that?
And you just put it out there. I mean, you're already saying it's made for TV.
Yeah, it's like, hey,
just go with it, man. Like,
I really have a fondness for generally. Let me say this: I have a fondness for TV adaptations of Stephen King. I really do. I like that. I like that crappy video look that they all have. I like that they're all filmed in either North Carolina or somewhere in Canada, and I like this sort of look of all of them. It is the ultimate in comfort food, and they're usually done professionally, so they might be a little dull and a little slow, but they're still like ahead of other stuff that I might be running into. Here, my feeling about Carrie 2002 is I think it does a couple of interesting things that I was surprised by that can sort of inform our conversation about adaptations of Carrie, but is it at all necessary? I don't know. I think Angela Bettis is fantastic. And here's the thing: next week we're going to discuss the final version, the 2013 version. And my question is there anything at all, anything that yet another version of Carrie can do that would be remotely different from what we've seen and would still be satisfying? Because if you really want to make a difference, you might diverge too much, and then we're unhappy with it.
I think the reason why they keep going back to the well with this material is because bullying is always going to be a topic that's timely.
And you can, you don't really need to change it up, basically, except for whatever technology people use. Basically, bullies are bullies, school. People who attend public school are still stuck in a classroom with one another. We should get started discussing this one. Okay, and to the extent that this is a remake of the De Palma version. Before we get to the shower bullying scene that everybody always remembers, this movie starts with one thing that's an innovation that is kind of like in the book. I'm curious if you guys were surprised by this. It starts with a flashback. It starts with a frame story that is going to that we'll keep going back to, knowing that we're beginning after it's all over with. And that, to me, was in keeping with the novel, where Stephen King occasionally would jump forward in time and discuss all of the events as though they happened.
You mentioned that a lot of the Stephen King adaptations that are on television are longer, but they're also a lot more often truer to the novel, and this is no exception. There's a lot of things here that are from the book that are not in the other the other adaptations. So that could be one. I'll go through as we're talking and tell you which ones are the ones that were mentioned here on the IMDb.
It's funny. That's the only one I can think of.
yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
Well,
that,
the one
that
at the
would-
end,
But,
the one at
okay.
the end where the young Carrie is spying on her neighbor sunbathing. That's in the
Right,
that
right, yeah.
that the
Oh,
other
yeah.
ones have filmed it, but they cut it. That's in the book, and there was something else. I'll find it in a minute.
You know, the thing is though, and yeah, okay, there's in some ways more of an attempt to be closer to the book here, and of course having more time to work with allows you that. But that doesn't mean that this is, and I'm not even a big fan of the De Palma film. I mean, I've said that repeatedly, but that doesn't make it this a better film. It just means it has more of the book you like in it, you know. And you know, a book is a book and a film is a film. And I'm a big, even though like, well, I don't think you can review a movie based on how much of a novel that you like is how accurate it is to that.
This adaptation is the only one that has the interviews with the survivors, and that's in the novel as well, and that's so true. And I don't know if that's. I mean, that's
but it made
basically
it
what
feel
we're talking
so
about with the
padded.
flashback.
That's the thing. Like all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't know that I care for that.
I like that they kind of did some. There were a few bits in the interviews that I thought were kind of interesting, and I'd forgotten about that. I think some of the attempts to update it were kind of interesting as well. You know, the 2000s technology being a thing. Still, even then, some of the computer stuff looked even dated by those standards. Of course, that's, you know what? That's actually, depending on the school system. When I substitute taught in Mississippi, they wanted me to teach on these antiquated computers. So in that keeping, maybe not so far off. I'm actually like going back, like, no, that's probably it. But, you know, I liked them really trying to put it together with, you know, who's to blame for this, and asking, was it Sue, you know, the questions, and her being a person of interest and all that kind of stuff. Like, I thought that was actually kind of closer to how it would be. All those bits actually kind of worked in a way that like I said, I thought I really hated this one, and rewatching it, I was more ambivalent. But there's bits.
It just made it feel like a low rent cop like all that stuff. Honestly, it looked like stuff that they had cut from an episode of Forever Night.
Well, it also looks that you're not entirely wrong, and it also is filmed like that. Like, I think part of what you're reacting to is it actually looks filmed that way. I mean, they have this weird color green, like super green color grading, and just strange choices. I mean, there's some strange cinematography choices throughout, like all the Dutch angles here and there, and jump cuts, and like the sounds, like all the where she does something and they cut and make weird sounds and everything. The Foley it's strange. Those choices were weird, but I see where you're coming from, Drew. I didn't. I guess maybe I remembered hating it so much that I was pleasantly surprised I didn't hate it that much.
And maybe if I had like a previous experience with this, I would have been kinder to it. But like when I heard, you know, when I heard Brian Fuller, who has done a lot of stuff that I really admire, was the screenwriter on this, I got really, really just like, I was like, oh, I bet so this is going to be something really interesting. And when I saw how like kind of meat and potatoes it is, like, and not even meat and potatoes the way that Jason is describing the other Stephen King miniseries, because if it had been at least that, it would have been like, you know what, I'm nostalgic for those, you know, old Stephen King miniseries. They take me back to a certain time in my life that feels good, you know, like, so like, you know, if it had even been that, I think I would have been a little kinder to it, but it just is so ugly. It's just an ugly looking.
I don't have that. I don't feel like it's that. I mean, I don't. Obviously, you're not wrong, right? Because it's total. But I don't feel like this is any. I think you said it exactly right when you said this has a Forever Night kind of feel about it. It has a sort of, this is what we're doing now with paranormal TV, like the whole stuff, all the stuff with David Keith as the cop, and his sort of snappy patter with the students. It does feel sort of like oh well, hey, we've got some cop drama Q&A going on here, and that's what this sounds like. Like it's really completely by the numbers. Like I've seen these scenes 1,000 times before. We know how these go, and here's
Oh,
another one. There's nothing fresh about that at all.
that's true, but also it feels very much like where he's grilling her about drugs and that condescending, like, well, that's good, but he really
Yeah,
means like, yeah, sure, right, I don't believe you, but anyway, this
yeah,
is how I'm laying the groundwork here. Like all that
yeah,
stuff is done adequately. It's just because it's
yes.
also fairly realistic. It's nothing new. Although, Drew, I wish when you were like, "Oh man, I'm excited about this Brian Fuller thing," I wish I had talked to you because I could have told you to go ahead and just slow your roll on that.
So just lower those expectations a little bit.
Expectations, because no, you
Maybe
weren't
that, and
ready
maybe
for
that would
that.
have changed the way I reacted to it.
I want to like switch over to because that's the donut, and they even I don't know if it's an accident that they start out with a conversation about donuts, and it is a donut. It's a donut story that is going to frame at the beginning and the end. But let's skip over that. When we get to what really gets things rolling, which is that Carrie is a hair twisting, scrawny, weird, mousy girl, who everybody is kind of put off by. And we have this whole thing where she gets her first period in the shower and she doesn't know what that's
Which,
about.
by the way, is
Go ahead.
absurd because she's
Okay.
obviously like a mature woman, and the actress is what did we say? She was 29.
It
So
is
I mean,
hard
that
to
was
be a 30-year-old freshman anytime in our
well,
nation's history.
and not
That's
only a
a
30-year-old freshman, but among all these people who are clearly very sexually mature, including her. So there's just no way
yeah.
that also always bothered me. That bothered me in the original one too. It's just super stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're supposed to imagine that Carrie's younger than that. I can't even begin to.
I
I don't know. Yeah,
so
I
go ahead.
mean, that's a sin that goes far beyond even this film. Like there are
Yeah.
so many. This Hollywood's always casting people in their like 20s and 30s as teenagers, and it's
Hmm.
weird. Like I think they, up until like the last Spider-Man movie, like how many times did we have a Spider-Man, a Peter Parker that was like pushing 30?
No, yeah, yeah, but she doesn't right, whatever. Anyway, that's fine if she were if we're talking about like, 90210 where they're high school students, but they're not there's no pretense that there's any kind of that they're just like just pubescent or whatever. They're sexually mature people, and so it's actually more comfortable to see a 20 something year old playing a sexually active character than it is to see an actual 16-year-old, because then you're like, especially if you're a parent, you're just like, oh, I don't want to think about that. But and so in this case, though, it's so absurd to have somebody who is clearly sexually mature saying she's getting her first period. I mean, just you have to like suspend your disbelief, but sometimes it's really hard. Like you were saying about the computer graphics being crappy. Every once in a while, you just kind of go, okay, I really can't accept this. This is not real to me at all, and that was one of the things.
At the same time, like I feel like is unrealistic as her age, or trying to wrap your head around her as that age. She's still one of the saving graces of this movie because she does put in a pretty good performance.
Oh yeah, she's great. I mean,
Yeah,
it
good.
just made so much sense the way she plays May, and then it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to have, even though I guess they're kind of the same movie, so it wouldn't have been worth it. But to see Lucky McKee doing this, so they're working together on May, and they just transition and remake that with this. I think that
Yeah.
would have been really interesting because I think he's really good as well.
Hmm.
I thought the one that got me as far as old was the prom king guy. Like that guy,
Yes.
man.
That guy, he
that is
does
the
look
oldest
32 or so. Yeah. Yeah. He makes Dylan
he's
McKay
good.
look young. Yeah.
He's good at what he's doing in the movie, but the whole time, every time I saw him, I, oh man, that did not work.
But I gotta say, that is not new. I watched a movie
Of
the other
course.
day with Roddy McDowall and Tuesday Weld, where they're college senior, sorry, high school seniors, and Harvey Korman is their principal, and he's this like megalomaniac high school student who can like start wars and stuff, and he's doing battle with Harvey Korman, and both of them are in their 40s. Both of them are in their 40s. and and Roddy McDowell is playing an almost plausible high school senior. It's just you just kind of live in a world where we go, you know what? Hell, everybody in Hollywood is 35 to 45, and we just sort of scatter them along a continuum of who they're playing based on who has the least
Well, I mean,
5
you
o'clock.
think how long it takes to get a career going. You can hardly fault people for
of course.
taking whatever
Yeah.
role they can, because let's face it, it's a tough business.
Oh, yeah.
But like I kind of agree with Julia that there's some of the casting here, even though I think this has got a really good cast, it does kind of stretch credibility in some ways.
So to get back to, let's assume for a moment that everybody seems the right age. It is a difficult one to overcome because she is clearly such a mature woman. But let's assume for a moment that she is age appropriate and having a late onset puberty and whatever. So the way the other girls react, where they are so filled with like glee and nastiness, this has always struck me as very strange. This is the place where Carrie becomes like a fairy tale, all versions of Carrie, because the level of cruelty that they are is like over the top. I assume, unless girls are just really this bad. But I mean, they
No,
are
I've never
No, high
met
school
girls that are
students.
that bad.
High school students can be really that bad.
Yeah.
But no,
I
I've
don't-
never met I've never met anyone that was quite that bad. I've met people who are bitchy and who say mean things, but this whole idea that they would and maybe it happens somewhere, but I've never seen people do that mob mentality where everybody gangs up on some. Now, I mean, obviously there's like schoolyard fights where everybody's going fight, fight, fight or something like that, but with girls, I've never seen a whole bunch of girls gang up in particular that kind of a violent way where they're chanting and pounding and all those kind of things, or throwing things at her, or like that. But of course, absolutely, they can be super catty and mean and vindictive and backstabbing. That stuff is, I mean, that's true for all ages, all people, all
Yeah.
genders. It's like that's not uncommon. However, I've never seen people behave in this particular way, but I have seen people say really mean things to each other. Absolutely.
Emily
Well,
DeRaven.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
So the double-edged sword of growing up somewhere super rural like I did was there was a lot of mean crap. It was definitely a microcosm of that. But I have actually had friends who told me some of their high school stories, and it was pretty messed up, man. Like, this is taken a slightly next level, but not too far off from, man, it could be really bad. And like I said, I told you the story before too, like where friends of mine got beat up for liking metal and Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah.
and crap. Like literally beat up.
Well, that's what I'm
and
saying.
stuff
I
like
think
that,
that's
like,
more of a boy thing. I feel like boys are the
uh,
ones who beat each other up, but I haven't seen girls behave quite this way. But I don't know. Maybe I've just been lucky and not seen that.
like I said, I've heard enough stories that I think, of course, it's played up for cinematic purposes, but there were things I've heard that I was like, holy crap. I mean, I thought I had some things bad, but again, like there's a movie out now that my friends are really digging called Bomb City, about a punk who was killed in, I think it was Amarillo. I have to look again, but I've heard it's great. But dealing with some of the crap that I dealt with when I was growing up, like I don't want to see that movie. Really, I'll probably catch it eventually.
Yeah.
But just like
I would
feel
like
like
to
it would
hear
be
a
infinite
specific.
rage for me to see this movie because it's
I just think I would
Ugh.
like to hear specific examples of women being treated like this by other women. I've heard, I mean, I know of particular, personally of women treating each other like crap and girls treating each other like crap by lying and and backstabbing and conniving, but not any of these kinds of
Ostracism. I mean,
physical
like
things.
in other
The
words,
ostracism is
keeping
super
somebody
common, of
out.
course.
That's the
Yeah,
big
that's very
tool.
common.
Is
But
yeah.
but this, like I said, this whole business where she's lying in the bathroom crying and they're all pounding into. I've just never heard of that actually happening outside of like some super weird, like a situation that ends up making the news or something. But I always hear about boys like ganging up and beating up on a kid, but I don't hear about girls doing anything quite like that. But again, it could be I just haven't heard of it. But I feel like this probably was written.
Kids can be exceptionally cruel. First of all, as Tony has noted, and like they can be exceptionally cruel to each other. Is that the norm? Maybe not, but what happens to Carrie right here isn't actually supposed to be the norm. It's supposed to be kind of something that does seem extreme for this school, which is why like the
because Rena
faculty
Sofer is really pissed off. Yeah,
yeah, the
true.
faculty makes a really big
coach is kind of
deal
amazed.
out of it.
Yeah.
So like, but like my high school experience was full of bullying and being bullied, and I don't have a hard time believing that there aren't girls that can be exceptionally mean.
Well,
Like,
and I am, again, I'm sorry that I don't have any anecdotes to say
Well,
whether it's
maybe
true or not.
sorry.
All
Maybe
you
yeah.
can say is all you guys can say is stuff like that happened to me, but you're guys, and I'm a girl who was bullied plenty, but never that way. It was always with
well,
words.
but and my rebuttal to that is this is supposed to be an act that does stand out. Like
Yeah.
it's not supposed to be like they're calling her names or whatever. Like this is supposed to be something that sets off the whole chain of events of what happens.
Yeah, that's well said. The Rena Sofer, who is this sort of wonderfully reliable nighttime drama actress, who
And daytime.
has the crazy and daytime these crazy eyes, the eternally crazy-eyed Rena Sofer plays the coach, and she's just astonished and livid over this thing that these girls have done. Emily DeRaven of Roswell plays the
And both of these actresses are on Once Upon a Time. Both Emily
no,
Davidman
that's true.
and Rena Sofer. Yeah.
Yeah, she plays the ringleader of the girls, and that's the other thing that strikes me as funny about the way the girls are sort of the pecking order of the girls in this school. You have Emily DeRaven, who is mean from the beginning. You have Sue Snell, who starts out just as a go along kind of girl. She's one of the pretentious, popular girls. But very quickly, she's kind of sick of it. She feels sorry for Carrie, and she has a lot of humanity. And then you have the others who I found really fascinating, like the student council president girl, and the other sort of mean girl, but she doesn't quite know all of the pranks that are going to get played. You get the impression that they would kind of go along with anybody. In another universe where Carrie, for some reason, went through a whole Mean Girls transformation and started becoming a very popular girl, these two would just get in line. They would just be like, okay, well, I guess Carrie's popular now.
I want to note that the actress who plays Carrie graduated, and Drew and Tony will appreciate this. She graduated from Westlake High School in Austin, and Westlake is a very pretentious kind of it's just very like wealthy school, and it's known for being pretentious. So I'm really curious if the actress is identifying with this character because maybe as an actor she was kind of artsy, left out, whatever, or if she actually is more one of the, because she's a great actor, one of the superstars of the school, and it was actually more on the side of the popular kids and is now having to play. Yeah, I'd be really curious to know what her high school situation was like and what she was perceived as. But I thought that was really interesting because she went to a school much like this one.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that I found most interesting about the updates is that they made Sue Snell a woman of color, and she's the one that, of course, empathizes with Carrie, and she's the only African American really in this whole story, and I think that does change that dynamic quite a bit. Like even if it's just all undertone. But I thought that was a really smart casting decision. And like that was one of the things
That
where
is
I was
interesting.
like, oh, okay, that's because, like, yeah, I thought that really opened up, at least in my interpretation, is like she's the one popular kid that actually does identify with
Mm-hmm.
Carrie. You have the rest of these sort of blonde, very Barbie doll looking, types, and then you have the one girl that does, stand out from them, even though she is, one of the alpha girls. And yeah, of course she's going to be the one that identifies with Carrie as kind of an outsider, and
because she has the potential to be marginalized,
yes,
even though she's not. Yeah, and it's funny, the fact that she's not marginalized means that she has done some kind of super whammy on everybody. Because she is apparently not only the only woman of color, but the only person of color in this entire town.
Well, and
And
I'm not going to speak for anyone, for Black people, but I would say that she probably would say that she has been. Like that character, if you looked at her whole life, would probably say that she does get marginalized a lot, and it's just that she's able to kind of play along and well enough and pretend well enough for them not to notice her so much. But I'm sure, because most Black people I've heard say, if not all, that's their identity as Black people. It just is with them all the time. Like they're always aware of the fact that people see them as different. So I'm sure she would say that she is in fact marginalized in some way, but she's been able to play the part well enough to go along with people that they've accepted her into their friendship. But I bet you that a number of those people would probably go, I'm not racist. One of my best friends is Black.
Well,
or something like
and
that.
there's always the thing of you hear this quite frequently, and white people say funny things. You hear this phrase used a lot nowadays. Like they say, even when it's well intended, they say stupid stuff. And I have no doubt that there's probably a lot of that going on in this.
Sure.
In her relationship with these other girls who seem superficial, even if a bit sociopathic.
Yeah.
What I find interesting too is Chris, Emily DeRaven's character, also is, maybe she's slumming, maybe she likes bad boys, but her boyfriend's a sociopath. He's not.
Yes.
Like a
he's
drug
not
dealer.
the hunky football guy, although he probably is.
No, he's no John Travolta, is he?
He is really a sociopath. Like when stuff starts to come out, you're just like, holy crap, what is it? Why this?
Yeah, he's
guy?
super scary. He's super scary.
Also, by the way, the worst
guy was
versions of people smoking pot ever. I don't know what they were supposed to be on, but I love that it's played like, man. And I want to say that by this time, maybe I'm wrong, because I don't smoke or drink really, or I definitely don't drink much. I never smoke. Like by this time, at least one of these people has probably smoked pot. Mm-hmm. And just watching these scenes where they're like on the bed high was just, what else were you on, or what were you supposed to be on, or how were you playing this? Like just things like that just make like just weird choices. And he's on like a totally, whatever he's on is totally different. And he's like his stares and all that. It's just really funny. I don't know if she's trying to if she's the kind of rich girl character who's like, oh well, I'm gonna go out with somebody dangerous and it's exciting. But this guy's
a truly scary guy. Yeah, he is a very scary individual.
Oh man.
Well, she's trying to piss off her parents. I mean, you hear that whole speech that she gives. They hear that whole speech that they give about how she's got the lawyer dad, but even though she's a C student and she's been in trouble, there's like 19 kids that have complained against her. And she spent all these days in detention. I mean, she's a rebel.
Right.
The scene where her lawyer dad comes in, this is the one scene in the movie that I loved, and it was such a stupid thing, but you very rarely see competent principals in horror films.
Yeah, that was good.
Yes.
And so like I was like, hey, I was like, good on you, guy who's good at his job. Like the fact that he puts lawyer dad in his place so thoroughly.
Yes.
I loved that. I loved this principal so much in that scene.
I was also heartened by Rena Sofer's character actually giving a crap And I don't know if this is just because it's female coach, but let me tell you, most male coaches, it would be a lot more, buck it up. Why don't you fit in better? Like, I like that, how that all played out as well. You know what was also really great? So, this is, again, skipping ahead. So, we have her get bullied. Sue feels sorry for her. She decides to talk her hunky boyfriend into, who's actually defended Carrie once in the library when people are being jackasses. And she's like, no, you should go out with Carrie. Like, I'm totally cool with it. She deserves a break. I liked his, no way. I know part of it is his like, man, that's weird. But also, legitimately, I got the impression that when he says she's gonna think this is a joke, like things don't turn around. That whole line of conversation, and then even how she reacts too, even after later on, Chris tries to poison her against Sue and kind of plays that up. But his whole line of going, I don't think this will work. I don't think this is a really good idea. Like, obviously she has a lot of problems. Isn't this just gonna make it worse? The way usually it's like hunky boyfriend, oh whatever, but they did not play it that way at all. And I actually thought that was pretty good. And
I thought that the betrayal of Sue's boyfriend was more realistic than the betrayal of they had William Catt basically playing this slab of meat with a mop of blonde hair on his head in the De Palma version, and he's a ridiculous character in that, whereas like this guy actually seems like a believable human being to me. So I actually this is that is another point in this movie where I will credit is credit due. Like I would honestly like to see this script done with a different director, because I think and a different cinematographer, because I think a lot of the other aspect, I think the screenplay has like some solid bones in it, but like there's just a lot of the other stuff that's going on that it just downgrades the whole thing.
Right.
Well, another interesting creative point here that you mentioned about this script is added. Carrie actually, throughout the first quarter, I'd say she feels like she's gonna boil over every time she's encountering other people. She always just seems like on the verge of snapping. But an interesting thing that this Carrie does, and I don't remember it from the 1976 version. If it's there, tell me. Carrie starts to research telekinesis and test whether she has powers, like actively working on it, testing it on hairbrushes. She's creating her own little X-Men school in her living room. That is new, because it means that Carrie that's a little bit of a level of self-directedness that the original Carrie didn't have. Sissy Spacek seems to be barely capable of making it through the day, and this Carrie at least is looking stuff up. She's still such a victim. She's so poor in her ability to handle other people, but that was new, and I thought that was interesting.
It might also tie into the whole, we may or may not be making this into a series.
Yeah,
that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But in an age, I mean, again, that's one of those updates. We're in an age where you do have, internet in your library at the very least.
Yeah.
Having her be self-aware enough to, this doesn't seem like a thing that, nobody else is doing this. I need to find out what is going on with me, with this power, with what I'm seeing, which, she knows that she's done some of this before. But, oh man, that meteor scene,
no boy.
I wish, again, in the original it was just kind of rocks, correct? Like, why meteors when you don't have the budget to do that and have it look good?
The funny thing is, we already used this in Rose Red. They lifted it from Carrie and put it in Rose Red, and which was
itself
also
is a lift from The Haunting.
Yeah, that's true. It's a super good point.
I constantly am just curious, why not shoot the things for your budget? It's maddening because it doesn't look good, and I get it. Like, sometimes it's because you want to push the envelope, right? Maybe it did look okay at the time, but I don't think so. If I remember correctly from graphics.
I could live with it. I've heard Sophia, for instance, say as long as I know what it is that it's supposed to be, I'm fine. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, okay,
But why
meteors.
meteors instead of rocks when it's so much easier? I just
No, I don't know.
that's
I
what
don't know.
it's just
It's a good
those
question.
choices. I don't. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, but which
But that's
inevitably
the
pushes
point.
us towards the prom,
Yeah. So
right?
in
Like,
fact, let's get there because the rest we've already talked about. One thing leading up to the prom, when she asserts herself with her mom and says, "Listen, mom, I'm making myself a dress. I'm showing off my breasts, and you're going to wait in the other room and watch your fingers because I don't want you to hurt yourself when I slam the door on you with my mind." I love all that stuff. Loving it.
good.
Yeah, I like that she starts to really get control of her powers. I mean, except that and to that extent, like obviously she doesn't. There's kind of there's kind of two different personalities that she has. She has her personality where she's kind of coming into her own and figuring out how to use these powers and trying to stand up for herself and really figuring out like what are her religious beliefs and what does she want to do. That's just she's starting to be that person. And then she's got like her possessed, like Damien kind of thing, where she's just suddenly goes into the trance and all this stuff happens and she doesn't remember what happened. So she's like completely
Yeah.
turns on, and then she has control over the powers, but not conscious control, but just the ability to create mass havoc. But I think that those are two different things. Like I think she knows that she's able to do some of these things, and so she can kind of try. It's like Luke with don't go to the dark side. Try to use the light
Yeah.
to work with the force, and so you can lift this spaceship even if you're not angry. But when you're angry, of course, all this stuff just happens automatically because it just comes out. And so I really feel like that's the case there. So that's what a neat scene with her mom, because she's kind of like, no, you know what? I need to start standing up for myself, and this is how I'm going to do it. But then when she kills her, oh, and that's another thing, by the way, from the novel that's different is that she kills her because in self-defense by stopping her heart as opposed to like
Hmm.
flying knives, whatever it was. So that again, it's like more subconscious because it's self-defense, that she's being drowned, and so she has to do something. But yeah.
I also like the bit where the mom is quoting the Bible but misquoting it, twisting it to however she
Yeah.
wants it to be.
Right.
Which I,
Hmm.
growing up in, I went to different churches and kind of found my own way. Where it came to the point where I would have people telling me something, and I'd read the Bible enough that I was like, man, I don't think I'm going to church there because this stuff that's not how that translates, etc. And once you realize that, and where she stands up and goes, yeah, I don't think that's how that line works. I'm
Mm-hmm.
go and look it up eventually. Like, that doesn't sound right. That really sounds like you just
You're making this
making
stuff
this
up.
all up. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that part, and because that is eye-opening when you have an adult, supposedly an authority, telling you something and you finally realize, yeah, I don't really think that's how that is. And become aware in that way, no matter what it is. And for me, I could also, like I said, associate with this. Like, that's not, you know what? I'm going to also look up a few translations because I don't really, that doesn't sound right. And,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
come to find out, there's a lot of mistranslation or twisting or whatever. And then seeing a sermon where somebody goes off on one thing where that's really not the intent. I thought that was kind of a cool thing to where she finally realizes all of this, and it happens, right before all these things come into play where she's going to the prom. So
Well, this is what we're going to go into is at this point where she is dealing with her mom. This is the moment when we're headed for, if it were a different kind of movie, a big payoff in a positive sense. She's coming into her own. She's going to overcome all this bullshit, and she's dealing with her mom and putting her mom in her place and still showing love by, and she doesn't want to hurt her mom. And it just so happens that she's on a collision course with Emily DeRaven and her psycho boyfriend, who are going to screw everything up. But if that didn't happen, then that's because it's a tragedy. But if that didn't happen, you kind of get the impression that this could be the first day of the rest of Carrie's life, and
But that's
Of course,
always the
there's a
case with
twist.
psychotic people. That's always the case with psychotic people, is that they're like, oh, if all of my days were perfect, I wouldn't have the need to be psychotic. If everybody was
Yeah.
always nice to me and I always got my way, I wouldn't need to kill a bunch of people. It's all your fault because I didn't
Yeah.
get my way and now I have to kill you.
Okay, now that's profound. Let's think about that for a second, especially as we go into this prom thing, and let's move us into that scene here. It comes prom time. Carrie's going, and the first thing that we know is the ultras are stuffing the ballot box to make Tommy and Carrie the king and queen. But before then, we just have a lot of business of people admiring Carrie. What do you think? Because the people who made this movie thought about this. What do you think about the prom scene here vis-a-vis our new thoughts about bullied people who act out and kill a lot of people, which is something we talk about more, and I think was on people's mind less, even in 2002, certainly in 1974, where it was like, more
Well,
of a cautionary
2002,
tale.
2002, you have Columbine behind you.
Right,
So
you'd have
there is
Columbine.
definitely this idea of, somebody going nuts and killing everybody. And yeah, you can say, oh, they were abused in their childhood and whatever, but other people who were abused in their childhood don't go and kill everybody. So I mean, there's definitely something wrong. And in this case, it almost, like I said, feels like a split personality or like a possession thing, because it's actually not even, she checks out
I think
completely.
she has a psychotic break. I don't
Yeah.
think she's not a psychopath. I think that's a wrong
Mhm.
thing to say, because she's not a serial murderer. She's not even a spree
Right.
killer. She just kind of snapped, and she
Mhm.
Yeah,
obviously
that's right.
feels remorse. She's capable of remorse, which is not something a psychopath has.
Yeah, no, I said
Yeah.
psychotic people, but yeah.
Well, she's not even really
Yeah.
psychotic. Like a psychotic break and being psychotic are it's not exactly the same thing. And
So Drew, but what do you think about this whole question of, like, they tried to change the way this prom scene goes because they were thinking about Columbine, which wasn't long before this. What does that mean? I mean, I don't understand. Like, how are we supposed to change our understanding of Carrie in a world post school shootings? Or is it meaningless? I mean, I have to say,
I
I've put
don't
the
think
answer
it's
in
a
the question.
meaningless
I don't think it's
question to
important.
ask. Okay, so this is it's a tough question to answer,
Yeah.
especially with the events of the last few weeks. But
Yeah.
I think in some cases, not all, but in some cases, and it's hard, and I'm probably going to get some flack online for saying this. When we're talking about mentally ill people, even when they do something that is monstrous and evil, we have to be able to step outside of ourselves and maybe look at their backgrounds with some kind of compassion and understanding, if we are going to keep events like this from happening in the future. And as a civilized, or ideally, so I question every day if we're still a civilized society, but in an ideal civilized society, we would even treat monstrous people with more understanding than we do. Like,
Sure.
the first
Absolutely.
thing, anytime something like this happens, the right wing likes to trot out, oh, the mentally ill, the mentally ill, the mentally ill. We have to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. So they're very quick to demonize a very large group of people. And mentally ill describes a lot of, like, that's broad.
Let me interrupt you to say that they don't say we should keep the guns out of the hands of mentally ill. They say it's the issue is mental illness, and then they
But
propose
they don't want
absolutely
to
no
talk
solutions
about,
of what to do
yeah,
about
they don't
that.
want to actually talk
Right.
about healthcare reform, So
Well,
Right.
like
Yeah.
that's the, like, so
Also-
it's they just want to scapegoat without actually having any real understanding of what they're
Exactly.
meaning. When they're talking about a group of people that describes everything from people who are psychotic and dangerous to people with mild anxiety disorders.
Right.
Like
Mhm.
you
Or
can't
depression.
just bludgeon the public with a word like that. And
Yes.
I agree with you.
so I think this is the reason why this story does still track very well. And I think, there is the impulse to, of course, to say, oh, well, there's too much violence in our schools. There's too much violence in our system. Let's not do a story like this. But I say the opposite. I say, let's try and explore through fiction why we are at the place we are at as a society, because I feel like maybe that'll give us, and again, here we go with loaded terms, maybe that will give us a safe space to figure out what the hell is wrong with us. Why do we keep allowing these sort of things to happen? If we have this character that forces other people to empathize with someone who is, at the end of the day, somebody who commits monstrous things, maybe we can come around to figuring out how to stop this stuff.
I have to say, a lot of times this feels very fairy tale-like. In other words, in many ways, I don't think Carrie is intended to really be taken all that literally. There was a moment afterwards when Carrie comes to her house, and shortly before her mom tries to kill her. Another way you could view this entire film is as though it were a fantasy of Carrie's. As though it were I am so put upon, I am so bullied, and I actually flew off the handle and set fire to everything, and I killed people with my mind. It is let me tell you how bad my day got, fantasy of acting out. And I think that's fine. I actually have to say, I think it's absurd for somebody to worry about, should I shoot Carrie differently because of Columbine. I think it's a dumb thing to think about. There's
Why?
There's so many steps between here and
Why
there.
is it a dumb thing to think about? I think it's an excellent thing to think about.
Think about
we
whether
have
I
to.
should do it.
We have to. Fantasy is always how we, sci-fi and horror in particular have always been where we end up asking hard questions.
No, I
about
agree with
ourselves.
you about that.
Well,
I mean, it's not a dumb thing for us to discuss. But Tony was going to say something first, and then I'll try and answer your question. Go ahead, Tony.
So I'm going to go back to something I've kind of repeated is I think some of the best sci-fi and horror holds a mirror in a way, is abstracted in a way that allows us to view it, just at an angle where it's not our day to day.
Yeah.
And allows you to reflect on that. As people tout, there's so much violence in society, and this is causing these violent video games, of which I worked on video games before. Horror is a thing that I've talked about, written some, etc. We have to ask ourselves, there are many other countries and cultures that watch the exact same movies we do. Why are they affected? That's odd. I think that we should ask ourselves, I would personally write things differently in a world, there's some pitches and stuff like that I've thought about and gone, well, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to write that. I think we should ask ourselves those questions. I think that I don't know about changing this, because to me, it's abstracted in the same and it's also a catharsis. Like when you say, oh, it's violence, seeing that in that mirror and viewing that is a totally different thing from acting out. I felt very simpatico with the kid in Trick or Treat, but I knew I didn't want to put a drill through a jock's head. I mean, maybe abstractly, yes, in a fantasy in your head dealing with that. And that's how you deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody is equipped to cope with that. I mean, we also live, as much as we say, oh, mental illness, this or that, how many kids grew up with all kinds of just rampant ADD medicine, just like it was just given out as if it was candy. We live in a world where the mentally ill were turned out in record numbers and had helpful places shut down in the by Reagan. Where does that leave us? Nobody really wants to talk about that. Dealing with friends of mine who have mental illness and my own, whatever goes through my head. Like this idea, to me, horror and sci-fi and fantasy has always been, yes, it can be violent. Yes, it can show us things we may not want to deal with, but also it allows us to deal with that by not being in average our day to day, right?
Yeah.
Which is why, again, I talked about earlier, I can kind of watch Carrie and go, whoa, some of this hits a little bit real, or Trick or Treat, or any number of these movies. But Bomb City, for example, is not a thing I want to see no matter how great the movie is. That I don't want at this moment, this weekend, I don't want to experience that. The supernatural revenge part of Carrie to me seems a catharsis as opposed to a playbook.
Yeah, I agree. I actually said that it's so funny when you find yourself rooting for the homicidal maniac because the people are such jerks. So
Yes.
Right.
there is definitely a revenge porn aspect to it. Um, but yeah, no, I think you do have to be sensitive to
And
the audience and what they're thinking, what the contexts are.
well, and Drew's right that in this movie they've made it clear that Carrie goes into a fugue state when she goes when she really
Right.
puts her foot down, dealing with everybody that has threatened her and threatened her mind and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Why did I think it was a dumb thing for Brian Fuller to be concerned about? I have this. I so I completely believe it is okay if you're a person who's traumatized by something, for instance. Let's say that you just completely cannot deal with suicide being depicted on screen, or you completely can't deal with rape, or completely can't deal with murder, or whatever it is.
Because you're
I think
triggered. You're
you are,
triggered.
yeah, and I think you are a righteous person in saying, hey, you guys are going to go watch that, and tell you what, I'm going to go get an Orange Julius. I'll join up with you later. I don't want to see that. I think that's cool, and you have every right in the world to feel that way. I think Brian Fuller doesn't need to worry about Carrie killing everybody in her gymnasium because it's a movie.
I was gonna say that I think that's absurd.
So many times, you're right. I will stop myself from writing something because I feel like, you know what, I think this would offend my parents or would offend my grandparents, or I worry about that. And maybe that's a failing on my part, or maybe it's not. Fine. I believe, though, that we also have a weird thing in our culture where we feel pressured to perform feelings about things that have nothing to do with what we're actually feeling or our actual reality. So that after a bombing happens, we'll be like, "Oh, my big movie about a bank robbery has bombs in it, and I'm going to make a big speech about how I don't feel like it's the right time to release it. I think those feelings are fake, and I think that they are false. And people say them all the time, and it's embarrassingly childish. This is art, and I'm not interested in people pretending to be sensitive to my feelings.
Okay. Let me contextualize this into something that just happened. When
Okay.
there was a shooting over the summer, and Marvel was going to release the trailer for the Punisher TV show. It was
Okay, I missed
because
this,
of the
but go ahead.
shooting in
Yeah,
Las Vegas. Because of the shooting
yeah,
in Las
right.
Vegas, they decided they weren't going to release the Punisher trailer when they said they were going to. Do you feel like that was hypersensitive on their part, or do you think that
I
was
absolutely feel like it's hypersensitive. I feel like they never decide not to release it because they've suddenly been overcome with a bout of conscience that they don't feel like they should be making violent movies. They just feel like they're worried that they're going to be accused of being insensitive. And I'm just
I
I, it strikes me as false. I'm not crazy about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead, Tony.
I think that the answer actually lies somewhere between. I think there are many artists, and I would personally like if I were to have a trailer coming out and that was my
Yeah.
thing and something had happened, I would be very conscious of that coming out. However, I think what you're reacting to, which I've seen often, is there's a bunch of dudes in suits who only worry that they aren't going to make bank on the thing. I
Yeah.
think you're seeing the two different things. I think there are many
Yeah.
people who could give a rat's ass that there's a human element to it. The same people who, hey man, smoking's really like tearing people up. Yeah, we should make some commercials about how bad it is. They don't care. And if you, again, my thing is if you smoke or whatever, that's you, man. But like, there are a bunch of people who only really care how it's going to affect the bottom line.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I don't think that everyone, I am not so cynical as to believe that because I've thought about this and what I might write or release. I think there are a lot of people who would lobby and go, man, when I was writing this, I had no idea this was going to happen. When I was filming this, I thought this was fiction.
I think
and I think that that's a
though,
big deal. I think that
that's-
you can think about that and go, maybe now's not the right time. And I think there are a lot of people who actually do feel that way. That's not disingenuous. But
Okay.
because of social media, we have a lot of things where the hype train and the kind of all the emotions we're exposed to all of this all the time, right?
Yeah.
So the kind of ebb and flow is it's just heightened. It's heightened. It's heightened. I gotta feel this way, or we're seeing all this stuff, and if you don't take a step back, if you don't allow yourself to take a step back, you can fall prey to this. This is how I should feel, etc. Without self. I mean, there's not much time in our social media days to have self-reflection.
Yeah.
I'm just as guilty. This is not I'm not saying I'm this person like, oh, I take deep thoughts in my study, and it comes off a little bit like, well, nobody really feels that way. I disagree in that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also easy to get wrapped up in a very emotional stakes in a world where narcissism, to me, and polarization, those are my two things I think have become rampant in a way that feeds off of each other and makes a lot of things legitimately hard to parse, to think about, to react to in a reasonable manner. And I don't have the solve for any of that. But I think to me,
I think he legitimately wanted to contextualize this movie into something that was contemporary, and probably, like, if you're familiar with a lot of his work, even though he deals in stuff that deals with like death and sometimes morbid topics, like, and dark stuff, like he's very obviously a sensitive person.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he, like, kind of responding to what Tony's saying about guys in suits, I don't think that that's where he was coming from. I think he was like, oh, this is a thing that has happened, and I need to be aware of that, but also I can kind of use it to inform what I am writing about and make it feel contemporary at the same time.
Well, certainly. I just want to point out, Tony points out a really good thing, that I shouldn't be so cynical as to believe that when somebody says that they don't mean it, because you're exactly right. They might mean it. They absolutely might. I do think there is such a thing as, if let's say that I'm a writer and I specialize in a particular let's say I work for a nonprofit and I write their press releases, and so my thing is oil, is stopping drilling of oil. Then no matter what article I'm writing, no matter what movie I'm reviewing, I'm always going to bring it back to, but how do I react to this movie as a person who's really worried about drilling for oil? And so if it has something to say about it, I'll go, this movie has so much to say about drilling for oil. And if it's getting too much attention and has nothing to say, I'll go, how can people be so into this movie when there's all these problems about drilling for oil? Because that's my job as a guy who writes articles about this issue. And what'll happen, though, in the world of this echo chamber on the media, is I can write an angry article about how a movie is problematic vis-a-vis this thing that just happened, and that'll shoot around the ecosphere without us ever, possibly without putting it into a further context to go, wait a minute, this guy's job is to get worked up over stuff. But Tony's exactly right. Many people are sensitive and many people are sincere when, and Drew, you're right. Brian Fuller may have been one of them, where he says, I was concerned about Columbine and I wanted to make sure that this fit into a post-Columbine context. Me personally, I'm annoyed when the news gets involved in art, and that's just me being unfair. I grant you that it's totally unfair. And Joya, I mean, that's what you were getting at, right? Is that I have a tendency to be over annoyed at how people bring the news into context.
Because I'm saying that art, like, I actually believe the complete opposite of what you're saying. I believe that art is often, if not most of the time, a reflection of the context. I mean, if you look at even the Mickey Mouse cartoons and whatever of during World War II, it's like always informed by what's going on around you in politics and the news. And I think anybody who writes art, who writes or who creates art, who doesn't incorporate that and consider it when they're doing their art is foolish. I mean, there's just, why would you write something and go, la la la, the world doesn't exist, I'm just writing what I want to write? You have to consider it, just like you consider.
Yeah.
And yes, I absolutely believe that part of it is going to be bottom line for sure. Like I said, that's how I started off with my example about your writing. It's not, I wasn't talking about, is your grandmother going to be offended? I was talking about, will my writing a vampire book be well received after the Van Helsing came out and crashed? It's like, no, I'm not going to bother writing it because of the bottom line, because right now nobody's going to want to see it because they're going to associate it with this other thing. Well, the same is true for politics and for news and for whatever else. It's that you're going to part of you is going to think, is this going to be
Yeah.
well received, and therefore is it worth doing monetarily? And the other part of you is going to go, what as an artist am I trying to say about the culture that I live in and the time that I live in, and do I want to say anything at all about it? And if so, what am I looking at specifically? What is the mirror through which I'm looking? I mean, anytime you
I
study art,
agree
you
with
study
you that
literature, you always have to look at what the context is that the person was working in.
okay, so like Roman Polanski's Macbeth, for instance, is heavily influenced, many people say, by the bloodiness of the Manson murders and the closeness of those murders to Polanski himself. And so it all, it gives a context both to how he made Macbeth, but even if that's bullshit, and in fact he made the Macbeth he would have made no matter what, and it didn't matter whether the Manson murders had touched him personally, it gives context to how we view that. I agree. Art is shaped by what's going on. Having said that, more often than not, in modern times, I find myself just annoyed by how the news affects art. I
Just anyway, something else I've
Okay.
always thought about too. You're in the whole art thing, so you're gonna have X amount of people who are gonna go, man, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? You're gonna have another group of people who go, haha, to me art is confrontational,
Yeah.
and I am going to make this thing that's gonna stick it. And I find those usually to myself, how I view that, to be a much more cynical thing. Where
I agree with you completely about that. Yes.
They adhere to the part of art that's like, it's not art unless it makes you squirm. And I personally, like, that's not me at all. I may want to bring up things that make you squirm in a way like, wow, again, the mirror part of it, right? But of course, all my friends watch the actual like Black Mirror, and I find it so real that I can't fucking watch it.
Yeah,
I watched some of it, I was like, man, no, man, I can't. We kind of live this. It's not even allegory in the way the Twilight Zone I see is.
Yeah.
It
is often a bummer.
Way
Yeah.
too real for me. And even though it's done so well, like it's done so well. But man, I can't watch it. I just also, by the way, I think we probably delved into the politics of the TV adaptation of Carrie way more than anybody who created. Once again, anybody who created this thing.
This conversation got a lot more tense than I was expecting it, actually.
Yeah.
I just think that anybody who made this, I'm sure there's someone who's thought of it in the same manner on the cast and crew. But in general, I think most people just thought of it as, how do we update Carrie for the year 2002? But again, that's why that's why we talk about these things, right?
I mean, ultimately, she's either going to be murdering students or not. By the way, I agree with you. I'm more annoyed by people who, take advantage of what people are thinking about on the news to sort of rush something out. Although, I have a soft spot in my heart for exploitation from the 70s. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a tough one. I think the main thing that I'm always annoyed at is mostly people just worrying about affecting a piece of art that already exists because they're concerned about how they're going to be judged. Maybe that's because I worry about it myself. I don't know.
No, but that's just being insensitive. I mean, that'd be like you saying, I don't care. I know I'm talking to a person whose mom just died, but I'm going to talk about how my mom and how great it is that my mom is alive, regardless of whether it's going to upset this person or not. You're not the kind of person who would do that. You would be like, I'm not going to talk
No.
about how awesome my mom is right now because I know it hurt this person's feelings. So why would you do that as an artist? Why would you be like, I don't care if it's going to hurt people's feelings who are watching this.
And the answer is because a lot of times the train's already left the station. I mean, that's what people don't recognize. I mean,
Well, they haven't put it out yet.
You have something that's coming out, and it's coming out this Friday. It's coming out this Friday, come hell or high water. And then on Thursday, something crazy happens. On Saturday, you're taking stupid questions from reporters, and You're just a guy
Well,
who
you
made a
can be all
movie.
the
You're just
upset
a
you want
person
about
trying.
that, but that's just the reality. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
being a good person who's sensitive to how people are going to feel is important, and B, yeah, as a smart business person, you're not going to do something that's going to completely be an idiotic move financially.
As soon as you can't,
Well,
what I'm telling you is, as soon as you can't help it, and we don't have a lot of patience with those people. Go ahead, Tony.
the best case I can see though is 2014, the interview where Sony got hacked and people were blaming
Yeah.
Korea. That weekend before all of that came out, the creators were there at at Button-Thon going,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll really affect anything. Like, I think we're good. Like, we haven't seen anything come out about this.
But
I
it sure
was
did, boy. Yeah.
telling people on Monday, like, hey, this is this interview this Q&A I saw, and then holy crap.
Yeah.
Did it
No,
just
you can walk
change
into
on
a
a dime?
buzzsaw. It can happen. Tony,
It,
here's one. So when Jack Reacher came out, the movie with Tom Cruise, which people found to be perfectly adequate. They argued amongst themselves about how true it was to the character, blah blah blah. But the point is, perfectly adequate. If you like action movies starring Tom Cruise, here's
sure.
another one who's fine. I remember Chris Matthews going on at length the weekend that movie came out because Chris Matthews was shaken to the core by another mass shooting that happens all the time over here. And the Tom Cruise movie had just come out, and Chris Matthews was really interested in whether the world could continue putting out Tom Cruise action movies because these mass shootings kept happening. And I also was like troubled by this mass shooting, but I remember shaking my head in complete disbelief that he could ask such a moronic question. We have action movies all around the planet. It's a completely meaningless thing to be concerned about. It was a bizarre and fantastic
But Jason,
moment of
why don't people use the N word in movies anymore? That it's offensive to a
yeah,
large section of the population. It's the same thing. It's something that is offensive to a large, even if it's temporarily offensive, like something
yeah.
where okay, we don't want to do it this month because we're remembering this bombing just happened, but maybe next year we won't care anymore because it will
And it's
be
a really,
not so
really, truly
numb.
valid point.
You know.
But it troubles me that we are so good at getting upset about Tom Cruise because we're offended that there was a mass shooting, but we don't actually do anything to stop mass shootings.
Well, that's a
I just
different
am
story. That's
so
a different story
Yeah.
entirely. But I'm just saying. Anyway, we've gotten like way
Yeah,
off
I
topic.
would
We should
like to talk
probably
about horror
get back
movies
to the
again,
movie.
please.
Yes.
My
okay.
Facebook is
So
filled with, I think, where this is going, and I've been really, really,
yes,
really wanting. I
yeah,
really
yeah, yeah. Okay.
scroll past a lot
So
of things.
we should
Anyway,
definitely wrap it up because yeah, this is the end of the film. Well, except for this movie
oh,
has an ending that we weren't expecting, which is that after Carrie has killed many, but not all, of the people in there in this prom
Just
massacre.
with boring
Uh,
electrocution, by the way. There's no
yeah,
interesting murders here
well,
except for just everybody's
no,
electrocuted.
well, here's the thing I found fascinating as well, going back to the why would you shoot this? So they don't do much burning because that's hard to do and it's very expensive to do those kind of like set people on fire kind of tricks. And it looks terrible in CG.
Yeah.
They went with electrocution as effective, maybe not. It didn't look great when the characters are, I don't know. It was kind of cheesy. But so they shoot around that and decide, well, this is the budget we have. But then when her rampage happens and there's all these weird floating cars and stuff, they decided they needed that, which you didn't need. You could have, blown
yeah,
windows out of houses or something.
Mm-hmm.
But oh man, it looks so bad. And then yeah, by the way, when you say, oh, we didn't know this happened, it's telegraphed so far in advance when they're interviewing Sue
yes,
that
yeah.
anybody didn't guess that Carrie was alive. Ah, you're gonna be so when you see the next mystery movie, you're gonna be so surprised at the end. Like, you'll never see it coming. M. Night movies will be just what? I can't believe it. If you're at all didn't understand that Sue's evasiveness meant Carrie was alive for multiple interviews.
Yeah, yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is going on here? Because Sue and Carrie are now doing a road trip to Florida, and so I guess that
I hope they
Were
pick
they
up
announced-
Bruce Banner on the way.
I guess they're
They
gonna
were
right.
they
David
were going to
Banner,
do a
David
TV.
Banner.
They wanted to do a TV show. You know,
Yeah.
like
So she's
they
gonna
wanted
go
to keep
from
it
town to
open-ended.
town and
Yeah.
what you
Like-
telekinesis
Yeah,
to
I could
fight
see it
bullies?
David
being.
Banner.
Yeah, we talked about it being Incredible Hulk-like, or also Dexter-like, like where maybe she just kills bad guys left and right.
No, I think it's going to be way more like 70s Hulk.
Yeah.
And again,
or
I got
could
a
it be-
waitress
could be-
job, and now I've telekinesis myself out of the waitress job onto the next town
Yeah.
where they
Yeah,
forget
think
that I
about it.
blew things up with my mind.
She'll get a job as a short order cook somewhere, or no, you're right. She'll be the waitress, but the lady who runs the cafe is real nice, but she's being hassled by the local sheriff.
I think
who
there would
wants
have
to
been.
marry
This is
her.
2002. I think there would have been a meta plot where they would have tried to explain where her
Ugh.
her
Oh, no,
telekinesis
you're right.
comes from.
Oh my God, it would
And-
be like
Scientists,
government
yes.
operatives. There'd
Yeah,
be
there would
secret
be some
government-
X-File shit, you know.
Oh,
And-
no. Everyone
Like-
dodged a bullet. I think.
Aren't you just so sad that they didn't make the Carrie?
Come on, man!
Monster of
I
the
would
Week
watch that
TV
movie.
show.
I would watch that show. I would absolutely watch that show, at least for a couple episodes, just to see. You know,
I mean,
it
it's like
depends on-
Hannibal. Hannibal worked out fine, apparently. I don't
Yeah.
watch it, but
Yeah, it's true. But Hannibal comes now, and so that's in a world where these shows have become much more like 22-hour miniseries, basically, where you're just it's a continuing story. Back in 2002, it still would have been an episodic bully of the week that Carrie sets fire to and then moves on down the road. Bum 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 bum. I can just imagine that.
So again, Drew mentioned it, but one jump scare in the car was
Oh.
cheesy. Two,
Yeah.
and I've seen this too many times. I don't know why people I'm going to double down on
That's terrible.
this really crappy thing that we've seen a kabillion times. They'll never know the second jump scare. It never just stop. It
Yeah.
never works. We've seen it enough in horror. Like if you're watching horror movies on the regular, maybe that's what they're hoping. Is most people aren't. But here's news. They are. They've seen this before. I'm gonna tell you, if you're thinking about this, and then the second one's a joke too. Just
What's
take,
the first
you
one
know,
you can
copy
think of? I
paste,
think they did that
take your
in American
highlighter,
Werewolf in London.
delete
did
that. Yeah, but again, yes. What is it? 70s, right?
So
Late
I can't
70s?
remember. It was like 81 or
Anyway.
something.
And I have yet to see one of those in recent memory, even in movies I thought were better than this, where the second jump scare is and I never knew that. It's always worse and more dumb. Good night. I was like, again, I like this movie more than I remembered it, but that was just terrible. Just stupid. Wait, she's really driving? Bump, bump, bump. No, of course not. She's dead. We know that.
Yep.
I mean, yes, okay. But again, that's three twists. Because already you have Carrie is alive, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got, but who's driving? Oh, phew. Wait. Oh,
That should be a twist
phew.
enough, honestly,
Oh.
that Carrie's alive. For heaven's sake.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Just stop.
It is
people.
truly, oh my God.
Don't do it again.
But again, I would have liked to have seen this terrible TV series, especially the Lonely Man theme, because also it's unusual for it to be two teenagers on the run. That's kind of new, that would be kind of cool.
I think if it was Psychic and a girl and the Hulk together would make it even better.
Yeah. I would love to see Carrie and the Hulk. That sounds
or
like
if
a
just
miniseries.
Carrie,
That would be awesome.
Sans X-Files stuff just started picking up wayward psychics of all walks of life in her travels. So eventually there's an army of psychics.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Given that she's only supposed to be 14 or whatever she is, what would actually happen is that she'd get people. I mean, and this is not something that you would want to see on a TV show, but people would keep trying to recruit her into sex trafficking or something, and she'd have to kill them. I really do think it would be a better show if it was
bank
a
robbery.
Dexter style show where she's killing all these sex traffickers and all these abusers.
Or other
That'd be way
psychos.
more interesting.
But I'm still
the
going
psychics
with
are bad psychics. Yeah.
I'm still going with that she picks up a bunch of psychics and eventually they have their own problem.
They form a team. I'm good with all this stuff. You see, you've just come up with a good 2-3 seasons of the Carrie TV series that never existed. So having said that, we should wrap this up. My God. Okay, we'll go Tony. It was Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, final thoughts on the 2002 Carrie, bearing in mind that next week we'll be back with yet another Carrie. Lay it on us.
I thought it was all right. Again, remembering it was Fuller, I kind of wanted it to be better, I suppose, because I think he's really good. And then I do wish I would have told Drew, like, whoa, don't get too excited there, buddy. It's better than I remember it. I can't imagine watching it unless it's for reference for something again. Even though, the cast is pretty good and they do some things that I didn't remember that I thought were actually pretty cool. But yeah, it's not super great.
Julia?
I think it's been an interesting conversation. I am especially intrigued by the notion, this is something that just I've been thinking about a lot, just even for years, is how much control do we have over our actions and our personalities and our decisions and all that, given our upbringing. So at the end of this, they show her as a child, and how she tells the neighbor that her mother has taught her that you only get breasts if you're a slut. They're called dirty pillows, etc. So you got all this stuff, all this context, and then that's the scene with the meteors that we were talking about, where the mom is completely nuts and and traps her in the closet a lot, tells her to pray, all these things. So she's clearly very, very much abused. And so at the end, when Sue Snell, they're at the cemetery, Sue Snell says to her, "This isn't your fault." Well, not all of it, not entirely your fault. And I'm like, yeah, that is just a great question. I think I'm gonna keep thinking about it, probably through the night. Is to what extent is your being crazy because you were super abused your fault, and then how much do we have a choice as to what we're going to do with that if we don't have access to healthcare, if we don't have access to a support network, if everybody around us is bullying us and we don't have a therapist that we can go to, there's nothing, no drugs, nothing. You have no support. How much is it your fault if you then go nuts and kill everyone? And what is there to be done about it? And yeah, that's definitely the question that we're asking in the context of the school shootings and other things like that, because it's not simple. It's not just, oh, well, if they're crazy, don't let them get guns, or what kind of crazy is dangerous versus just, kind of interesting, or something that can be easily dealt with medication versus talk therapy, or can't be dealt with at all these questions. So even though the film itself is not super amazing, I do think these are all really interesting questions to ponder, and I'm glad we've at least started to touch on some of them.
By the way, before you go on, and sorry, Drew, when you said something and it triggered the language geek in me. Before anybody corrects it, yes, indeed, I do know that meteorites are what falls through the earth and hits things, and a meteor is not that. When I refer to meteor, I understand this.
Yeah.
Yes, meteor is not the right term. Meteorite is actually what it is. Just so you know, because people get pedantic that way.
The falling rocks. Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I'm full of grammar eccentricities tonight. Yet another one right there. I'm gonna go with not enough coffee today, and it's later. Sorry.
Excellent. And Julia, bear those ideas in mind, because let's get back to them next week with the most recent one. That whole question of having looked at all these versions, talking about the different versions, how much do we blame Carrie, and how much blame lies in the way she's been tormented? How do we deal with that? Drew, what are your thoughts on the 2002 Carrie totaled up?
Well, in the context of what Julie is saying, we barely got into the relationship with her and her mom in this, so I hope we can talk more about that next week, because I feel like that's important to the overall Carrie experience. I still don't think this is a very good film. It does, of course, raise a lot of interesting topics. This got, as I said earlier, this got a lot more tense between us than I was quite expecting. But in some ways, I think that's good for the overall conversation. I enjoyed talking about this movie and the questions it raised a lot more than the actual film itself, which I still unfortunately find to be a bit charmless and dull and lifeless. And I don't know that I would ever recommend this particular version of Carrie. And I'm coming to appreciate the Brian De Palma one more and more as we explore these different versions of this story, because as I said way back when we reviewed the original film, I am not that big of a fan of it, but now that I'm seeing the other attempt, I'm starting to see why that one is revered as much as it is. I do hope that we can continue talking about some of the issues that we talked about tonight, because I think it's important. Tony talked a lot about catharsis. I think maybe hearing us discuss this even at times heatedly on this show might provide some kind of catharsis for some of our listeners as well.
Thank you very much, and I agree. I hope we hit on a lot of the same stuff next week. It is so cool to have this opportunity to take the same work and discuss it as different people come after it every time. There aren't a lot of opportunities like that. Carrie is kind of an unusual thing, and that's been shot over and over again. But there are like Shakespeare and things like that, but you don't have a lot of stories that are just shot again and again. That's a neat opportunity, and I'm really glad that we're doing it. So my final thought: yes, this is not the strongest version. I don't think it holds a candle to the Brian De Palma thing, but that's that's the work of Brian De Palma. It's a TV movie. It's in many ways it really looks like it. Some of it feels very false, but I do think that Angela Bettis is really amazing.
No, she's great.
Yeah, and she's an amazing performance. She's fun to watch the whole way through. Patricia Clarkson also is really fascinating, and I kind of like the idea of what might have come after if this had actually flown as a TV pilot, which it didn't. So that makes it kind of a fun oddity. I'm glad that we watched it, and I can't wait to be back next week with the one starring Chloe Grace Moretz, who is an actress who leaves no impression on me, so we'll see what she comes up with for Carrie. Okay, so let's do endorsements. What you guys have going on, or what you've been reading, but share it with us. Let us know what's been on your mind that you want to share with people. Joya, do you have anything that you wanted to endorse?
I just came out of my Olympics 2-week stupor, or whatever the word is for when you're stuck in this watching something every day. But TV wise, there's really nothing. But we did go and see Black Panther, which you've heard everybody say it's amazing, and we loved it. It was very fun. I loved to see a film that was entirely. It was like everyone in it pretty much is black except for Martin Freeman, but it's not a black movie. It's not a movie intended to just be watched by black audiences and like, oh, we don't care if white people watch it or not. This is like everyone's going to enjoy this movie just like everyone enjoys all Marvel films. And the fact that everyone in it is black, and the fact that the people, the army behind the king are all women, it's just part of the thing. It's not the point of the film. But in this case, it's just a really fun superhero movie that happens to embrace a lot of African themes, and just like it would if it was in in Japan or whatever. It was just like, okay, well, this is where it is, and this is the people that are here, and it's just a really great film. I mean, it was so well done, very exciting, well acted.
If I had thought, I would have. Yeah, that was high on my list. Awesome movie.
You want to pick up? You're also endorsing Black Panther.
I have a friend who I've played with before, who goes by Deshade Moonbeam. He also, Jeffrey is his name, and he's also done a ton of work, action, choreography, all kinds of stuff. Filmmaker guy, and he sponsored some screenings here in Austin. Like, hey, let's get everybody together, all walks of life, all races, creeds, etc. Let's go watch this. Primarily people of color, in order to raise money to get people out to the theater, and hey, let's all see this, and here's some awesome representation, etc. And I missed his screenings of it, which I was really sad, because he's just awesome dude, and I think what he did was really cool. But watching it when I finally did get to see it was like, it's just cool. Like, it's a cool movie.
Yeah.
I also pictured in my head, I always wanted to find out before he passed that if some trouble had happened, that all the female members of Prince's band would have been like the warriors
Yeah.
behind the king. Like, I always just pictured that. Like, oh man, something happened, and just everyone jumps up from behind they're these awesome musicians with these great clothes and everything, and they put down their guitars and drums and basses and everything, and like kung fu battle a crowd. That's how I always pictured that happening, just because of the way his band was always so awesome. Like, female members of the band were amazing.
No, I agree.
Everybody that's how I always pictured it. Was
especially as you see them in Purple Rain.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they're very sort of close knit, and absolutely.
I always pictured watching all the warriors, the female warriors in Black Panther. That's basically how I wanted at some point to just see that, like the Purple Rain version of that at some point. I don't know.
Drew, what about you? What do you got?
Well, I also have to. I think Black Panther actually is probably the best superhero movie that's ever been made. Like, I know that's kind of a big thing to say at this point, but I mean, outside of its obvious cultural significance, and it actually does have a lot of very timely political stuff. I mean, they talk about race a lot in the movie, and they talk about isolationism, nationalism, immigration, all this stuff. And I think that's great. And, but I also love the fact that stuff was able, because that's all baked right into the character anyway. But I thought it was great. And this is the first comic book movie that I think I've ever seen where it also didn't ever apologize for blatantly comic book stuff. Like, we're going to have armored cyborg rhinos, and we're going to have a guy named Killmonger, and we're not going to have a single bit of irony about that. Because like, one of the things that really annoyed me about the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and a lot of other superhero movies do this to a lesser degree, is like anytime there's something that is weird or, what people would call comic booky, they have to kind of make it into a joke or, have to take like a minute to explain it away, or like, oh, we can't actually call this character this because it's too weird or too strange. Black Panther had no time for that. It was like you were either on the bus and, this is the leader of a sovereign nation who dresses up like a cat and beats up bad guys, and you're either okay with that or you're not. Here's an ice palace with a gorilla face carved into the side of it. And that is something that I've been like for years. I've been like, okay, we've now had, like, if we're going to go back to the Richard Donner Superman, we've now had almost 40 years worth of big budget superhero movies. And I think the regular public has finally got to the point where they can handle full-on superhero tropes without trying to make it into a joke or without having to explain it to a point where, like, you've completely made it not mythic anymore. And I think that's one of the things this movie really is that it's, on top of being timely and on top of being smart and charming and exciting, it's very mythic. And it gets the mythic qualities of superheroes better than just about any other movie I've ever, except for maybe the good parts of the Donner Superman. Like, before the Donner Superman has to resort to making jokes about everything. And I'm not insulting that movie. That is a movie I love. But that stuff still bothers me. Like, this movie, it says, okay, we can have it both ways. We could have, because comic books have always been able to do that. And for some reason, the superhero films have not. And I finally feel like, this is a movie that is like, gets it. And I loved that about it. So, I hate to be like the third person in a row to endorse Black Panther, but I can't wait to see can't wait to see the movie again. Like, I love the fact that we are getting a Black Panther movie, and I love the fact that it's as good as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, that's fantastic. So among the three of you, I'll join. Maybe we'll just say that. You know what? We all endorse Black Panther. If you must see it at the Alamo Drafthouse, because they
Oh,
have a wonderful slideshow that just goes through the history of the Black Panther, which is pretty great. I got one more thing I want to endorse. I didn't get to watch a lot of TV this week because I was in a freezing cabin in Oklahoma, but I did come across this hilarious online conversation just today, where Terry Goodkind, who's a famous author, um, experienced this thing that I guess happens to a lot of famous authors, New York Times bestselling authors, where he didn't care for the cover of his new book, and not because it was poorly drawn, but because he thought that the characters didn't look like the way he described the characters in the book. And I don't know Terry Goodkind at all. He might be a wonderful person, might be a terrible, no idea. But this is an interesting phenomenon because he was so upset by this cover that he went on his own Facebook and goes, "This new book is a great book with a terrible cover. So I'm starting a new contest where you tell me the things you don't like about the cover." Or the whole contest was going to be around people complaining about the cover of his new book. And I don't know, maybe he was going to send them a copy of the book. I have no idea. And the internet came down real hard, and I think honestly, rightfully so, on Terry Goodkind for this, because this was not. There are things that happen where you don't like your cover, or you don't like the release date you get, or you don't like whatever, and it is sad. It's truly sad that the only thing you can do with that information is call up your best friend and go out and eat pie and complain. That is
oh
it.
man, I like having experienced things in things that I worked on not turn out well.
Yeah.
I certainly won't go on this internet and no,
Don't.
just don't do it. Like no.
Thou
I
shalt
get
stop
where he's
thyself.
coming. Like I can see like, man, why is this person not this? But in the history, oh yeah, that's not what I would have done. Because there's things, and I only you're among authors or you're among other creatives, and you kind of go, man, this happened. Really? Oh man, yes, like this. But
Absolutely.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Please, no matter how famous
Among
you
your
are,
friends,
just don't.
yeah, you go,
That's
or
I mean,
maybe,
regardless, dude, like I just had to look up the cover. The art is done well. I don't know what direction the artist was given, but this isn't like the Mega Man NES cover where
it just kind of looks like generic. It just kind of looks like generic fantasy cover art. Like
as a painting,
but it looks
it's
really well done. I have seen
confidently
terrible
done.
covers.
Like to go and trash somebody on Twitter,
Your Facebook.
very publicly.
When you're like a best-selling
so
author.
classless. Yeah, it's so classless. Like maybe talk to your publisher. You know, like I don't know. Like there just seems to be like there have been so many more adult ways to handle. Like,
I'm sure
I feel
that
so
he
bad for the artist.
regretted this. I have to say, I think this was a stupid ass thing for Terry Goodkind to do, but I feel bad that he did this because I'm certain that he will come to regret it. And I hate to see people make mistakes that were avoidable. I just do, you know. I just kind of
that's the folly of the internet now, because like there's like people do things without really thinking them through, but it's because it's so instantaneous, you know, like where once you would have, I mean, we see it every day now, you know. It's just usually it doesn't have implications like this. Like my friends post stupid shit all the time. And, you know, but unfortunately it doesn't affect somebody's career. You know, like this could actually negatively affect this artist.
The artist's career. Yeah.
Oh man, like because on that same note, for example, I'm part of a Facebook group that posts like bad heavy metal album art covers, and then another one that's like bad band pictures. But the band picture thing, especially, that just happens, man. Like I try not to post anything about that because guess what? I have a picture of one of my former bands, and we're on train tracks. I've got another picture. We're in front of a brick wall. Those are terrible and cheesy. They were effective at the time, but holy crap, I have not a leg to stand on when people go, oh, look, another band. Like, man, at any given point, you're one step away from somebody just, you know, the traditional movie thing where they slide the picture across the table to you and go, well, is this you? Like,
Well, also, also, Tony, you know, taking a photograph of people standing on train tracks photograph well. brick walls. Why do you put a comedian against a brick wall? Because there's nothing to distract you from the comedian.
I know, but
there's a reason why those things exist.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
like
no, it is for sure.
Retrospective.
I have to say,
but
I
try not to
think about like.
Yeah, well, I just try not to be like, oh, look at that, because I just know. Yeah. Somewhere out there, man, any of us are one step away from that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I'm a jackass at least once every day, and like I often, it's funny, we've been talking about repercussions of things throughout this entire podcast, and I always think like, oh, is that going to come back to bite me on the ass? Like nowadays, that is how you think, because that's the world we live in now. And I probably am a little too hypersensitive about it, because generally I'm a pretty congenial, and I think most people would tell you, friendly guy, but I at the same time, every day, at least once a day, something comes out of my mouth that I regret. So I can't imagine not giving that same amount of care to the things you post. But I probably posted stupid stuff that I should regret on the internet too. So hey,
whenever I see somebody do something really regrettable, I always imagine that at the end of the day, that person already knows that it was a dumb thing, and they go to the cafe with their friend, and the first thing they do is they're going to say, "You will not believe what I did today." And their friend is like, "Oh yeah," because I worry about that all the time. I almost felt bad bringing this conversation up, except for it was fascinating to me, just how perfectly how odd it was for an author to lash out this way, but also stuff like that happens all the time. And so you write something and you go, nope, I'm not going to say that publicly. That would be unwise. Go ahead, Tony.
You do assume an amount of self-awareness that not everyone has.
Yeah.
That I think is also a problem in society today.
That's true.
I am not saying that I am completely infallible in this, but I often look upon and tell people in panels when they ask about breaking into this or that, or being a professional, etc. Yes, there's a level where some people it's never bad. It's the no all press is good press kind of thing, when in fact that's not really true. And again, not that we should probably wrap it up, but at some point in time, also, we should post the excerpt that you and I use about pants being fluffed and folded.
Yes.
It's too long of a story to go into right now, but I think at some point in time, we should go into that, because since you mentioned that to me, has been am I being that guy at this moment?
Am I being that guy? Yeah. That guy was Don Simpson, by the way, in a long story told by You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again. Okay. Wow. That was our fascinating, really unusual, very surprising conversation about the 2002 television remake of the movie Carrie. We are so excited to be doing this retrospective, and I think we got some good ideas for what's going to come up next. We will be back next week, barring some strange activity, and we look forward to hearing you guys' comments on everything we talked about. We are so thankful that you're there, and I'm so thankful that you guys, Joya, Tony, Drew, that you've been here to experience this with me. And thanks, guys. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.